My son gave my daughter-in-law $500,000 from the inheritance I had left untouched. When I asked where it went, she hissed, "Stay out of this, old hag." I stayed silent. Hours later, a knock at the door made her face turn pale, and then my world changed forever. I never thought my Tuesday morning would start with discovering that $500,000 had disappeared from my late husband's inheritance. The coffee was still warm in my hands when I opened the bank statement that had been sitting on my kitchen counter for 3 days. I'd been putting off looking at it, the way you avoid opening medical test results when you're afraid of what they might say. There it was, in black and white numbers that made no sense at first. A withdrawal for exactly $500,000, authorized by my son Michael. My hands started trembling so badly I had to set the coffee cup down before I dropped it. Henry and I had worked our entire lives to build that nest egg. 43 years of marriage, of saving every penny we could, of choosing generic brands and taking staycations instead of real vacations.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
When Henry passed away 2 years ago from his sudden heart attack, I'd left the inheritance account untouched. It felt sacred somehow, like disturbing it would mean letting go of him completely. I called Michael immediately. My fingers fumbled with the phone as I dialed his number, my heart racing in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of the anxiety attacks I'd had right after Henry's funeral. "Mom, what's up?" His voice sounded rushed, distracted. I could hear his daughter Emma chattering in the background, probably getting ready for school. "Michael, I need to ask you about something." I tried to keep my voice steady. "There's been a large withdrawal from the inheritance account, $500,000. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. I could hear him moving around, probably walking away from Amanda and Emma so they couldn't hear our conversation. "Mom, I can explain," he said finally, and something in his tone made my stomach drop. "Amanda needed the money for something important. It's just temporary. Just temporary. As if $500,000 was pocket change you borrowed for lunch. What could possibly be so important that it required that much money without even discussing it with me first?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. "Look, it's complicated. Can we talk about this later? I'm trying to get Emma ready for school, and I'm already running late for a client meeting, but I couldn't let it go. Michael, that money represents your father's entire life's work. We saved every penny of that for your future, for Emma's future. I need to understand what happened to it." Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had a defensive edge I'd been hearing more and more lately, especially when Amanda was involved. "Mom, Amanda will explain everything to you. She's better with the financial details than I am. Can you come over around noon? She'll be home from her yoga class by then." The fact that my own son was passing me off to his wife to explain where my husband's money had gone felt like a slap across the face, but I agreed. Mostly because I needed answers and Michael clearly wasn't going to give them to me. I spent the morning pacing around my small apartment, the same one I'd moved to after selling the family house because it felt too big and empty without Henry. I kept looking at that bank statement, hoping the numbers would somehow change if I stared at them long enough. At exactly noon, I knocked on the door of Michael and Amanda's suburban home, the house Henry and I had helped them buy with a down payment gift when Emma was born. Amanda answered, looking perfectly put together in her expensive yoga outfit, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. "Diana," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Michael said you wanted to talk about the money situation." The money situation, as if it were some minor bookkeeping error instead of my husband's life savings. "Yes, I think that would be a good idea," I replied, following her into their immaculate living room. Everything in their house was white or beige or some other neutral color that looked like it came straight from a magazine. It was beautiful, but it felt cold, unlived in. Amanda perched on the edge of their white leather sofa, while I sat across from her in a matching chair that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 3 months. "Amanda, I need to understand what happened to that money," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. $500,000 is a significant amount, and Michael said you could explain where it went. She fidgeted with her wedding ring, a massive diamond that caught the light streaming through their floor-to-ceiling windows. "It was an emergency, Diana. A family emergency that required immediate action." "What kind of emergency?" I pressed. "A medical emergency," she said quickly, still not looking directly at me. Michael's cousin in California, the one you met at our wedding, he was in a terrible accident and needed surgery that his insurance wouldn't cover. We couldn't just let him suffer. I tried to remember Michael's cousin from California. The wedding had been 5 years ago, and there had been so many people there. But something about Amanda's explanation felt off. Too rehearsed, like she'd practiced it. "That's very generous of you both," I said carefully. "But wouldn't it have been appropriate to discuss this with me first?" That money was meant for Michael's future, for Emma's education fund. Amanda's perfectly composed expression flickered for just a moment, and I caught a glimpse of something that looked almost like irritation before her polite mask slipped back into place. "Diana, I appreciate your concern, but Michael and I are adults. We can make our own financial decisions without needing permission from every family member." The dismissiveness in her tone stung, but I pushed forward. "Of course you can. But this wasn't technically Michael's money to give away. That inheritance was meant to benefit the entire family, including Emma's future." That's when Amanda's mask finally slipped completely. She stood up abruptly, her yoga-toned frame suddenly radiating hostility. "Look, Diana, I don't know what you're trying to imply here, but that money is gone and it's not coming back. Michael made a decision to help family, which is what decent people do. Maybe if you understood that concept, you wouldn't be sitting here interrogating us like we're criminals." I felt my face flush with heat. "I'm not interrogating anyone. I'm simply asking where my husband's life savings went." "Your husband's life savings?" Amanda's voice rose sharply. "Henry's been dead for 2 years, Diana. That money belongs to Michael now, and he can do whatever he wants with it. Maybe it's time you accepted that and stopped trying to control every aspect of our lives." The words hit me like physical blows. I'd never heard Amanda speak with such venom before, though I'd sometimes caught glimpses of this side of her when she thought I wasn't paying attention. "I'm not trying to control anything," I said quietly, my voice beginning to shake. "I just want to understand." Amanda crossed her arms and looked down at me with an expression of pure disdain. "What you need to understand is that this is none of your business. Stay out of this, old hag." The silence that followed felt deafening. I stared at this woman, this stranger who had just called me an old hag in my own son's living room, and felt something inside me break. Not just my heart, but something deeper, something that had to do with my sense of place in the world, my value as a human being. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. "I see," I said, though my voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and hollow. Amanda was already walking toward the front door, clearly eager to get me out of her house. "I'm glad we could clear this up," she said, though her tone suggested the exact opposite. I followed her to the door in a daze, feeling like I was moving through water. As I stepped outside, I heard Amanda close the door behind me with more force than necessary. I sat in my car for a long time, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I tried to process what had just happened. Amanda had called me an old hag. My daughter-in-law, the mother of my granddaughter, the woman my son had chosen to share his life with, had looked me in the eye and called me an old hag. But even more disturbing than the insult was the realization that Amanda's explanation about the medical emergency felt like a lie. Everything about her body language, her defensiveness, her inability to meet my eyes had screamed deception. I was still sitting there trying to figure out what to do next, when a dark sedan pulled into Michael and Amanda's driveway. A tall man in a gray suit got out and walked purposefully toward their front door. Something about his demeanor, the official way he carried himself, made my stomach clench with dread. Through my car window, I watched him knock on the door. When Amanda answered, I saw her face change completely. The color drained from her cheeks so quickly I thought she might faint. Even from my car, I could see her hands trembling as she gripped the doorframe. The man said something to her, showed her what looked like a badge or identification, and Amanda's legs seemed to give out slightly. She had to steady herself against the door. Whatever was happening, it was clear that Amanda had not been expecting this visitor, and judging by her reaction, whatever he was there to discuss was going to change everything. I sat frozen in my car, watching this scene unfold, knowing somehow that this moment was connected to the missing money, to Amanda's lies, to the cruel words she'd just spoken to me. The man disappeared into their house, and Amanda closed the door behind him, but not before I caught one last glimpse of her face. She looked terrified, and for the first time since discovering that bank statement this morning, I felt something other than hurt and confusion. I felt the first stirring of what might have been hope. Or maybe it was something darker than hope. Maybe it was the beginning of justice. I couldn't bring myself to drive away. Something about that man's official demeanor and Amanda's terrified reaction kept me glued to my car seat, watching their house like I was waiting for something terrible to happen. And maybe I was. 20 minutes passed before the front door opened again. The man in the gray suit emerged first, followed by Amanda, who looked like she'd been crying. Her perfect yoga outfit was wrinkled now, and her sleek ponytail had come loose, strands of blonde hair framing her pale face. They stood on the porch talking in low voices. I couldn't hear what they were saying from my car, but I could see Amanda gesturing frantically, her hands moving in sharp, desperate movements. The man remained calm, professional, occasionally nodding or shaking his head in response to whatever she was saying. Finally, he handed her what looked like a business card and walked back to his sedan. As he pulled out of the driveway, he slowed down next to my car and rolled down his window. "Excuse me, ma'am," he called out. "Are you Mrs. Diana Patterson?" My heart started racing. How did this stranger know my name? I rolled down my window cautiously. "Yes, I am. I'm Detective Martinez with the Financial Crimes Unit," he said, showing me his badge. "I was hoping to speak with you about some financial irregularities we're investigating. Would you have time to come down to the station this afternoon?" Financial Crimes Unit. The words hit me like ice water. "What kind of irregularities?" I managed to ask. "It involves large cash withdrawals and some questionable gambling debts," he said gently. "Your name came up as the account holder for one of the affected accounts." I glanced toward the house where Amanda was still standing on the porch, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Does this have to do with the missing money from my husband's inheritance?" Detective Martinez followed my gaze. "Among other things, yes, ma'am. Would 3 o'clock work for you?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He handed me his card and drove away, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and Amanda's watchful eyes. The police station smelled like coffee and industrial cleaning solution. Detective Martinez led me to a small interview room with gray walls and fluorescent lighting that made everything look harsh and unforgiving. "Mrs. Patterson, thank you for coming in," he said, settling into a chair across from me. "I know this must be confusing and upsetting for you. I just found out this morning that $500,000 is missing from my late husband's inheritance account," I said. "My son authorized the withdrawal, but my daughter-in-law claims it was for a medical emergency. I'm starting to think that might not be true." Detective Martinez opened a thick file folder. "You're right to be suspicious. We've been investigating Amanda Patterson for the past 6 weeks, following up on complaints from several casinos about unpaid debts and suspicious financial activity." My mouth went dry. "Casinos? Your daughter-in-law has been a regular at 3 different casinos in the area for the past 8 months, he explained, pulling out a stack of photographs. "These are surveillance photos showing her at various gambling tables, sometimes staying for 12 to 14 hours at a time." He slid the photos across the table. There was Amanda, unmistakably Amanda, sitting at blackjack tables, feeding money into slot machines, standing at roulette wheels with stacks of chips in front of her. In every photo, she looked completely absorbed, almost frenzied. "This can't be right," I whispered, staring at the images. "Amanda doesn't gamble. She's always been very responsible with money. She manages all their household finances." "That's often how gambling addiction works," Detective Martinez said kindly. "It's a secret life that family members rarely see. According to our investigation, Mrs. Patterson has lost approximately $600,000 over the past 8 months. $600,000. More than what was missing from the inheritance account. Where did she get that kind of money?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I already knew the answer. "That's what we're trying to piece together," he said. "The $500,000 from your husband's account was just the most recent transaction. Before that, she'd been using credit cards, taking cash advances, and apparently forging your son's signature on several bank loans." I felt sick. "Michael doesn't know, does he?" "We don't believe so. Your daughter-in-law has been very careful to hide her activities. She's been intercepting bank statements, handling all the financial paperwork for the household, and telling your son that she's been making investments. Investments. Just like she'd told me about the medical emergency for Michael's cousin. Everything was becoming horrifyingly clear. The cousin story, I said slowly. There was no medical emergency, was there? Detective Martinez shook his head. We checked. Your son's cousin in California is perfectly healthy. He's never been in any kind of accident, and he has excellent insurance coverage through his job. I leaned back in my chair, feeling overwhelmed. So she just lied to me, looked me right in the eye and lied. Mrs. Patterson, people with gambling addictions often become very skilled at deception, he explained. They create elaborate stories to cover their tracks, and they become experts at manipulating the people closest to them. What happens now? I asked. Can we get the money back? His expression grew more serious. That's complicated. Your daughter-in-law has agreed to cooperate with our investigation, which is why I was at your son's house today. She's admitted to using the inheritance money for gambling, and she's provided us with detailed records of her losses. She kept records? Gambling addicts often do. It's part of the compulsive behavior. She has spreadsheets going back months, tracking every bet, every loss, every dollar she spent. The idea of Amanda sitting in their perfect white living room, carefully documenting how she was destroying our family's financial security, made me feel nauseated. The problem is, Detective Martinez continued, the money is gone. She lost it all. There's nothing left to recover. Nothing left. 43 years of Henry's careful saving, his sacrifices, his dreams for our family's future, and it was all gone. Fed into slot machines and lost at card tables while Amanda played the role of the responsible wife and mother. Does Michael know you're investigating his wife? I asked. Not yet. We wanted to speak with you first, since you're the primary account holder. We'll need to interview him as part of our investigation, but we wanted to understand the full scope of the situation before involving him. I thought about my son, probably at his office right now, completely unaware that his wife had been living a double life. Completely unaware that she'd stolen from his own mother, and then called her an old hag when confronted about it. There's something else you should know, Detective Martinez said, his voice gentler now. This isn't Mrs. Patterson's first offense. She was arrested for check fraud in Nevada 5 years ago before she married your son. The room seemed to tilt slightly. 5 years ago? But that was right around the time she and Michael met. She was using a different name then, he explained. Amanda Wilson instead of Amanda Patterson. The charges were dropped when she paid restitution, but it shows a pattern of financial deception. Amanda Wilson. She'd been living under a false identity when she met my son. Everything about their relationship, their marriage, their entire life together was built on lies. Why didn't this show up in a background check or something? I asked. Your son probably never ran one. Most people don't when they're falling in love. And Amanda was very careful to present herself as someone she wasn't. She had fake references, a manufactured work history, even false financial statements. I remembered when Michael first introduced us to Amanda. She'd seemed perfect, too perfect almost. Beautiful, charming, intelligent, financially stable. She'd told us she worked in marketing for a tech company, that she had a business degree from a respected university. Michael had been so proud of her, so happy to have found someone who seemed to have her life together. It had all been an elaborate performance. Mrs. Patterson, Detective Martinez said, leaning forward slightly, I need to ask you something important. Are you willing to press charges against your daughter-in-law for theft? The question hung in the air between us. Pressing charges would mean destroying my son's marriage, probably devastating Emma, tearing apart what was left of our family. But not pressing charges would mean letting Amanda get away with stealing my husband's life savings and lying to all of us for years. What would happen to her if I pressed charges? I asked. Given the amount involved and her prior record, she'd likely face several years in prison. There would also be civil penalties, though as I mentioned, there's no money left to recover. Several years in prison, Amanda with her perfect yoga outfits and her white leather furniture and her elaborate lies, behind bars. The thought should have given me some satisfaction, but instead it just made me feel tired. What about Emma? I asked. What happens to my granddaughter if her mother goes to prison? That would be up to your son to decide. He'd likely have full custody. I thought about Emma, sweet 6-year-old Emma with her gap-toothed smile and her love of fairy tales. She adored her mother, had no idea that Amanda was anything other than the perfect parent she appeared to be. How do you explain to a child that her mother is a thief and a liar? I need time to think about this, I said finally. Detective Martinez nodded understandingly. Of course. But Mrs. Patterson, there's one more thing you should consider. If you don't press charges, if Amanda doesn't face consequences for her actions, she'll likely do this again. Maybe not to your family, but to someone else's. He was right, of course. People like Amanda, people who could lie so easily and manipulate so skillfully, didn't just stop because they got caught once. They got better at hiding it, more careful about covering their tracks. How long do I have to decide? I asked. Take a few days, he said, but we'll need your decision by the end of the week. And Mrs. Patterson, whatever you decide, your son deserves to know the truth about his wife. As I walked out of the police station, my phone buzzed with a text message from Michael. Mom, Amanda told me about your conversation today. She's really upset. Maybe we should all sit down together this weekend and work this out as a family. Work this out as a family. As if his wife stealing $500,000 and calling his mother an old hag was just a misunderstanding that could be resolved over Sunday dinner. I stared at the text for a long time before responding. Yes, I think a family conversation is exactly what we need. But the conversation I was planning wasn't the one Michael was expecting. It was time my son learned who he'd really married. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those surveillance photos of Amanda at the casino tables, her face intense with concentration as she fed my husband's life savings into slot machines. By morning, I'd made a decision that surprised even me. I was going to do some investigating of my own before confronting Michael. Detective Martinez had given me his card, but he'd also mentioned that Amanda had kept detailed records of her gambling. If she was as compulsive about documentation as he'd suggested, there might be more evidence of her deception hidden in plain sight. I knew Michael's work schedule by heart. He left the house at 8:30 every morning and didn't return until after 6. Emma was in school until 3:15, and Amanda usually picked her up and took her to various after-school activities. That gave me a window of time when their house would be empty. The spare key was still hidden under the decorative frog by their front door, the same place it had been since they moved in. Michael had given it to me years ago, back when I was still welcome in their home, back when Amanda still pretended to like me. Standing in their living room felt surreal. Everything looked exactly the same as it had yesterday, when Amanda had called me an old hag and dismissed my concerns about the missing money, the white leather furniture, the perfectly arranged throw pillows, the family photos strategically placed on side tables. It all looked so normal, so perfect, like a display in a furniture store, but now I knew it was all built on lies. I started with Amanda's home office, a small room off the main hallway that she'd claimed as her workspace for managing their household finances. The desk was organized with military precision, everything in its proper place. Bills were filed alphabetically, bank statements were arranged chronologically, and her computer was positioned at the exact center of the desk. I opened the desk drawers systematically, looking for anything that might give me insight into Amanda's secret life. The first 2 drawers contained exactly what you'd expect: pens, paper clips, stamps, checkbooks, but the bottom drawer was locked. I searched the desk surface for a key, checking under the computer keyboard, inside the pencil cup, even lifting the edges of the desk blotter. Nothing. Then I remembered something my mother used to do when I was a child. She'd always hidden spare keys to important things in her jewelry box, taped to the bottom of the top compartment. Amanda's jewelry box sat on the dresser in their master bedroom. It was an expensive-looking mahogany piece with multiple drawers and compartments. I felt like a criminal going through her personal belongings, but I reminded myself that she'd stolen from me, lied to me, and insulted me in my own son's living room. There, taped to the bottom of the top compartment, was a small silver key. Back in the office, the key fit perfectly into the desk drawer lock. Inside, I found what Detective Martinez had described: Amanda's detailed gambling records. But these weren't just simple spreadsheets. They were obsessively detailed logs of every casino visit, every bet, every win and loss. going back almost a year. The first entry was dated just 2 months after Henry's funeral. While I was still grieving, while I was trying to figure out how to live without my husband of 43 years, Amanda had been planning how to steal from his estate. The entries were written in Amanda's neat handwriting, with different colored pens for different types of information. Red for losses, green for wins, blue for the source of the money. I traced the progression with my finger, watching as small amounts quickly escalated into larger and larger bets. March 15th, Riverboat Casino, slots, $200, household grocery money. March 22nd, Riverboat Casino, blackjack, $500, Michael's birthday money from mom. April 3rd, Golden Nugget, poker, $800, sold my wedding ring, told Michael it was being cleaned. My heart stopped at that entry. Amanda had sold her wedding ring, the symbol of her marriage to my son, to fund her gambling addiction, and she'd lied to Michael about it. The entries continued, growing progressively more desperate and involving larger amounts of money. May 10th, Riverboat Casino, roulette, $3, our dollars, cash advance on Michael's credit card. May 18th, Golden Nugget, blackjack, $5 dollars, forged Michael's signature on home equity loan. June 2nd, Lucky Strike Casino, poker, $8. First took loan against Michael's 401k. Each entry made me feel sicker. Amanda hadn't just been stealing from the inheritance account, she'd been systematically draining every source of money she could access, forging Michael's signature, lying about the purposes of loans, creating fake emergencies to justify large expenditures. But the worst entries were yet to come. In July, she'd started targeting the inheritance account directly. July 15th. Riverboat Casino, multiple games, $50, $1,000, first withdrawal from Henry's account, told Michael it was for Emma's future education fund. August 3rd, Golden Nugget, high-stakes poker, $75,000, second withdrawal, claimed it was for investment in Michael's business. September 12th, Lucky Strike Casino, VIP room, $125,000, third withdrawal, said it was for home renovations. The lies were so elaborate, so carefully crafted. Amanda had told Michael that she was securing their family's future while she was actually destroying it, and Michael, trusting and honest Michael, had believed every word. The final entry was dated just 3 days ago, October 20th. Riverboat Casino, desperate attempt to win back losses, $250,000, final withdrawal from Henry's account, told Michael it was for cousin's medical emergency. That was the withdrawal I'd discovered yesterday morning. Amanda's last desperate attempt to recoup her massive losses had been the final blow to Henry's life savings. But there was something else in the drawer that made my blood run cold. A folder labeled Insurance Policies contained life insurance documents for both Michael and Emma. Amanda had taken out substantial policies on both of them within the past 6 months, naming herself as the sole beneficiary. I sat back in the desk chair, trying to process what I was seeing. Why would Amanda take out life insurance policies on her husband and daughter when she was drowning in gambling debt? The implications were too horrible to consider, but I couldn't shake the feeling that these policies weren't just financial planning. My hands were shaking as I photographed each page of Amanda's gambling log with my phone. Detective Martinez needed to see this, but more importantly, Michael needed to see it. His wife hadn't just stolen money from his family. She'd been planning something much worse. I was so absorbed in documenting the evidence that I almost missed the sound of a car door slamming in the driveway. My heart leaped into my throat as I realized someone was home early. I quickly returned everything to the drawer, locked it, and slipped the key back into my pocket. I heard the front door open and Amanda's voice calling out, "Emma, go wash your hands and start your homework. I need to make some phone calls." I was trapped in the office with no way to get to the front door without being seen. The only window in the room faced the backyard, and it was too high for me to climb out easily. I could hear Amanda moving around in the kitchen, her high heels clicking on the tile floor. Then I heard her footsteps coming down the hallway toward the office. I pressed myself against the wall behind the door, hoping she was just passing by, but the footsteps stopped right outside the office door. I held my breath, praying she wouldn't come in. The doorknob turned. "What are you doing in my house?" Amanda stood in the doorway, her face a mask of fury. She was still wearing her yoga outfit from this morning, but now it was wrinkled and stained, and her hair was a mess. She looked like she'd been through some kind of ordeal. "I came to get some answers," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, despite the fact that my heart was beating so hard, I was sure she could hear it. "By breaking into my office?" She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "This is illegal, Diana. I could call the police." "Go ahead," I said, surprised by my own boldness. "I think they'd be very interested in what you keep in your desk drawer." Amanda's face went pale. "You went through my desk?" "I know about the gambling, Amanda. I know about the casinos, the forged signatures, the fake emergencies. I know everything." She stood there for a moment, staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Then, to my shock, she started laughing. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was high-pitched and desperate, the kind of laugh that borders on hysteria. "You know everything?" she repeated, wiping tears from her eyes. "You don't know anything, you stupid old woman. You think this is just about gambling? You think I'm just some pathetic housewife who can't control herself at the casino?" Her tone was so different from the polite mask she usually wore that it was like talking to a completely different person. "Then tell me what it's really about," I said. Amanda moved closer, and I could smell something on her breath that I couldn't identify. Not alcohol, but something chemical and sharp. "It's about survival," she said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "It's about doing whatever it takes to keep my life from falling apart. You think your precious son is some kind of catch? You think being married to Michael is some fairy tale?" "Michael loves you," I said, confused by the venom in her voice. "Michael is boring," she spat. "Michael is predictable and stable and everything I thought I wanted when I was running from my last life. But boring doesn't pay for the lifestyle I deserve. Boring doesn't give me the excitement I need. So you decided to steal from his family? I decided to take what I could get before I had to disappear again." The words came out matter-of-factly, as if she was discussing the weather. "The gambling was supposed to multiply the money, give me enough to start fresh somewhere else, but it didn't work out that way." "Start fresh somewhere else?" I repeated. "What about Emma? What about your marriage?" Amanda shrugged. "Emma will be fine. Kids adapt. And the marriage was always temporary. Michael was just a placeholder, a safe harbor while I figured out my next move." The casual way she talked about abandoning my granddaughter made me feel physically sick. "You were planning to leave them?" "I was planning to leave with enough money to never have to depend on anyone again," she corrected. "But now that plan is ruined, thanks to your meddling." "My meddling? You stole from me, Amanda. You stole my husband's life savings and then called me an old hag when I asked about it." Her expression turned ugly. "Yeah, well, maybe if you'd minded your own business, none of this would have happened. Maybe if you'd just accepted that your son was a grown man who didn't need mommy looking over his shoulder all the time." I stared at this woman, this stranger who had been living in my family for 5 years, pretending to be someone she wasn't. "Who are you?" I whispered. Amanda smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm someone who does whatever it takes to survive. And right now, you're threatening my survival." Something in her tone made alarm bells go off in my head. I thought about those life insurance policies, about the desperate final gambling attempt, about the way she was looking at me now. "Amanda, we can work this out," I said, edging toward the door. "We can figure out a solution that helps everyone." "No," she said, blocking my path. "We can't, because you've seen too much now. You know too much." That's when I saw her reach into her purse and pull out something that made my blood freeze. It was a small silver revolver. "Amanda, don't do anything stupid," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Stupid?" She laughed that horrible laugh again. "Diana, this is the smartest thing I've done in months. With you gone, Michael will be so devastated he won't question anything. And with the life insurance money, I'll have more than enough to disappear and start over somewhere new." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The life insurance policies, the escalating gambling debts. Amanda's plan hadn't just been to steal and run. It had been much worse than that, and now I was the only thing standing between her and the perfect crime. "Grandma Diana, is that you?" Emma's sweet voice calling from the hallway shattered the tense moment like glass breaking. Amanda's hand with the gun trembled, and for a split second, her mask of cold calculation slipped back into the fake maternal warmth she showed the world. "Yes, sweetie. Grandma's here," I called out, my voice somehow steady despite the terror coursing through my veins. "I'm just talking to Mommy about something important." Amanda's eyes darted between me and the door, clearly calculating her next move. The gun was still pointed at me, but Emma's presence had changed everything. Even Amanda, for all her coldness, couldn't risk her daughter walking in on this scene. "Can I show Grandma my school project?" Emma asked, her footsteps getting closer to the office door. "Not right now, honey," Amanda said, quickly sliding the gun back into her purse. Her voice had transformed completely, taking on that sing-song tone she used with Emma. "Grandma and I are having a grown-up conversation. Why don't you go watch TV for a little while?" But I want to show her my butterfly collection," Emma protested, and I could hear her little hand turning the doorknob. Amanda shot me a look that promised terrible consequences if I said anything to alert Emma to what was happening. "Emma, sweetheart, remember what Mommy said about interrupting when adults are talking? Go watch your cartoons, and maybe Grandma can see your project later." There was a pause, then Emma's disappointed voice. "Okay, Mommy." We listened to her small footsteps retreating down the hallway. Amanda waited until she heard the TV turn on in the living room before speaking again. Her voice low and menacing. "You see how easy it would be?" she whispered. "Tragic accident. Grandmother slips and falls down the stairs during a visit. So unfortunate. Michael would be devastated, but these things happen to elderly people all the time." The casual way she described my potential murder made my knees weak, but Emma's presence had also given me something I hadn't had before: time to think. Amanda couldn't do anything to me while her daughter was in the house, which meant I had a window of opportunity. "Amanda, listen to me," I said quietly. "You don't want to do this. You're not a killer. You're someone who made some bad choices and got in over your head." She laughed softly. "You still don't get it, do you? You still think I'm some kind of victim of circumstances? Diana, I've been planning this for months. The gambling was just the cover story." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I needed a reason for all the money to be gone," she explained, pulling out her phone and showing me something that made my blood run cold. It was a bank account statement showing a balance of over $400,000. "I didn't lose all that money gambling. I lost about half of it, but the rest is sitting safely in an offshore account under a different name." My mind reeled. "You've been planning to fake your death?" "Not fake it," she corrected. "Just disappear. New identity, new life, new country." The gambling addiction story would explain why all the money was gone, and Michael would eventually move on. But then you started asking questions. I stared at her, finally understanding the full scope of her deception. "The life insurance policies were supposed to be the final payoff," she finished. "A tragic family accident would have given me enough money to live very comfortably for the rest of my life. But your meddling has complicated things. So, what's your plan now?" I asked, trying to keep her talking while I figured out how to get out of this alive. Amanda was quiet for a moment, apparently considering her options. "Now I have to accelerate the timeline. The good news is that your unexpected death today solves several problems at once. Michael will be so grief-stricken he won't question anything else for months, giving me time to arrange the other necessary accidents." She was talking about killing Michael and Emma as casually as she might discuss weekend plans. "Amanda, please," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "Emma is your daughter. She loves you. You can't possibly be planning to hurt her." Something flickered across her face then, something that might have been genuine emotion, but it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Emma will be better off without me," she said finally. "She'll be better off without any of us. Kids are resilient. She'll be adopted by some nice family who can give her a normal life." The absolute coldness of her statement left me speechless. This woman had been living with my family for 5 years, had been raising my granddaughter, and she felt nothing for any of us. We were all just obstacles to her ultimate goal of financial freedom. "Mommy, can I have a snack?" Emma's voice drifted down the hallway. "In a minute, sweetie," Amanda called back, then turned to me. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out of this house with me, very calmly and quietly. We're going to get in my car, and we're going to drive somewhere more private where we can finish this conversation. And if I refuse?" Her hand moved back toward her purse. "Then I'll have to get creative about explaining to Emma why Grandma isn't moving anymore." The threat to involve Emma in witnessing my murder was the final straw. Whatever happened to me, I couldn't let this innocent child be traumatized by seeing her grandmother killed. "All right," I said quietly. "But let me say goodbye to Emma first." Amanda considered this for a moment. "Fine. But remember, One wrong word and she becomes part of this. We walked out of the office together, Amanda staying close behind me. Emma was curled up on the white leather sofa, watching cartoons and coloring in a book. She looked up when she saw us, her face brightening with the pure joy that only children can show. "Grandma, are you staying for dinner?" I knelt down beside her, my heart breaking as I looked at her sweet face. She had no idea that her mother was a monster, that her entire life was built on lies, that she was in danger from the person who was supposed to protect her most. "Not tonight, sweetheart," I said, hugging her tightly. "But I want you to know that Grandma loves you very much, no matter what happens." "I love you too, Grandma," she said, hugging me back with those fierce little girl arms. "Will you come see my butterfly project tomorrow?" "I hope so, baby," I whispered, fighting back tears. "I really hope so." As I stood up, I did something that surprised even me. I pulled out my phone and quickly sent a text message to Detective Martinez. "In immediate danger. Amanda has gun. At Michael's house. Send help." Amanda noticed my movement, but didn't realize what I'd done until it was too late. Her eyes narrowed when she saw my phone in my hand. "What did you just do?" she hissed. "I sent a message to someone," I said, no longer caring about the consequences. "If something happens to me, they'll know exactly where to look." For the first time since this nightmare began, Amanda looked genuinely worried. "Who did you text?" "Detective Martinez," I said. "The one who's been investigating your gambling. The one who knows all about your criminal history in Nevada." Amanda's face went white. "You've been talking to the police?" "I've been talking to a lot of people about you, Amanda. Or should I say, Amanda Wilson. Your real identity isn't as secret as you think it is." The mask was completely gone now. Amanda looked like a cornered animal, desperate and dangerous. "You've ruined everything," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "No," I said firmly. "You ruined everything the moment you decided to steal from my family and lie to my son." That's when we heard the sound that changed everything. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. Amanda heard them too. Her face cycled through several emotions in quick succession. Fear, rage, calculation, and finally, a cold acceptance. "Emma," she called out sweetly, "come here for a minute. Mommy needs to tell you something." Every maternal instinct I'd ever had screamed in alarm. Amanda was calling Emma over, and I could see her hand moving toward her purse again. "Emma, stay where you are," I said loudly. "Diana, don't make this worse than it has to be," Amanda said. But there was something in her voice that told me she was past the point of rational thinking. The sirens were getting closer. Through the window, I could see the flashing lights reflecting off the neighbors' houses. Help was almost here, but I wasn't sure it would arrive in time. Emma looked confused, glancing between her mother and me. "What's wrong? Why do you both look scared?" That's when Amanda made her final, desperate decision. She pulled the gun out of her purse, but instead of pointing it at me, she pointed it at Emma. "Nobody moves until those police cars turn around and leave," she said, her voice deadly calm. "Nobody makes a sound, because if anyone tries to be a hero, my daughter pays the price." I stared at this woman who had just threatened to murder her own child, and I realized that there was no reasoning with her. Amanda wasn't just a gambling addict or a thief. She was something much worse, something that had been hiding behind a perfect suburban facade for years. But as I looked at Emma's terrified face, as I heard the police cars pulling into the driveway, I also realized something else. Amanda had made one crucial mistake. She had threatened the one person in the world I would die to protect. And now I was going to make sure she paid for every lie, every theft, every moment of terror she had inflicted on my family. The front door burst open with a crash that shook the entire house. "Police! Nobody move!" Detective Martinez appeared in the living room doorway, his weapon drawn, followed by two uniformed officers. The scene they encountered must have looked like something from a nightmare. Amanda standing behind the sofa, pointing a gun at her own 6-year-old daughter, while I stood frozen across the room. "Mommy?" Emma's voice was small and terrified. She didn't understand what was happening, couldn't comprehend why her mother was holding a gun, or why policemen were suddenly in her living room. "Everyone stay calm," Detective Martinez said, his voice steady and professional. "Amanda, I need you to put the weapon down and step away from your daughter." "No," Amanda said, her voice high and desperate. You don't understand. This woman, she gestured toward me with her free hand, has been harassing my family. She broke into my house. I was just defending myself. Ma'am, we have evidence of your gambling activities and the fraudulent withdrawals from Mrs. Patterson's account, one of the officers said. We also have records of your previous arrest in Nevada under the name Amanda Wilson. Amanda's face crumpled at the mention of her real identity. That was different. That was a mistake. This is different. Put the gun down, Amanda, Detective Martinez repeated. Let's talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, Amanda screamed, and Emma started crying. My life is over. Everything I worked for is gone. That's when Michael's voice came from somewhere behind the police officers. What the hell is going on here? My son appeared in the doorway, still wearing his business suit from work, his face a mask of confusion and growing horror as he took in the scene. His wife was pointing a gun at their daughter while police officers had their weapons drawn. Michael, Amanda said, her voice suddenly taking on that manipulative tone I'd heard her use so many times before. Thank God you're here. Your mother has lost her mind. She broke into our house and attacked me. I was just trying to protect Emma. Michael looked from Amanda to me to the police officers, clearly trying to process what he was seeing. Mom, what's going on? Amanda, why do you have a gun? Your wife has been gambling away your family's money for months, Detective Martinez said before I could respond. She's stolen over $500,000 from your mother's inheritance account, forged your signature on multiple loans, and has been living under a false identity. That's impossible, Michael said. But I could see doubt creeping into his eyes. Amanda doesn't gamble. She manages all our finances. Michael, she's been lying to you about everything, I said gently. I found records of her casino visits, documentation of every theft, evidence of fake emergencies she created to justify taking the money. Show him, Amanda said suddenly, her voice turning cold again. Show him the records you found by breaking into my private office. Detective Martinez nodded to one of the officers, who pulled out a folder. Mr. Patterson, we have surveillance footage of your wife at multiple casinos, detailed gambling logs in her own handwriting, and evidence of identity fraud dating back 5 years. Michael took the folder with trembling hands. As he flipped through the pages, I watched his face change. The confusion gave way to recognition, then to hurt, then to a kind of devastation I'd never seen before. The cousin's medical emergency, he said quietly, looking up at Amanda. There was no cousin, was there? Michael, I can explain everything, Amanda said. But she was still holding the gun pointed at Emma. Explain how you stole from my mother? Explain how you forged my signature? Explain how you've been lying to me for our entire marriage? I did it for us, Amanda shouted. I did it for our future. I was trying to make us rich. By gambling away my father's life savings? Michael's voice was rising now. By stealing from my mother and then calling her an old hag when she asked about it? You called my mother an old hag? Michael's face darkened with anger I'd rarely seen from him. Michael, please. Amanda's voice was becoming more desperate. We can work this out. We can be a family again. I just need help. I have a problem, but we can fix it together. The only problem here is you, Michael said, his voice cold. Put the gun down, Amanda. Stop pointing it at our daughter. Our daughter? Amanda laughed, and the sound was chilling. Michael, you still don't understand, do you? I never wanted a family. I never wanted to be tied down to this boring suburban life. Emma was just insurance, a way to make sure you'd never question my story, never leave me. The words hit Michael like physical blows. I could see him struggling to reconcile this cold, calculating woman with the loving wife and mother he thought he'd married. You're saying you never loved Emma? He whispered. I'm saying I did what I had to do to survive, Amanda replied. And right now, what I have to do is get out of this situation. That's not going to happen, Detective Martinez said firmly. Amanda, you have two choices. You can put the gun down now and we can resolve this peacefully, or this situation is going to end badly for everyone, especially your daughter. She's not going to put the gun down, I said suddenly, the realization hitting me like a lightning bolt. She never intended to. This was always part of her plan. Everyone turned to look at me. What do you mean? Detective Martinez asked. The life insurance policies, I said, pieces falling into place in my mind. She took out substantial policies on both Michael and Emma. She wasn't planning to just steal the money and disappear. She was planning to kill them and collect the insurance money. Amanda's face went white. That's not true. Diana, you're making that up. Show them, I said to Detective Martinez. When you search her office, you'll find the policies, both taken out within the past 6 months, both naming her as the sole beneficiary. Michael stared at his wife in horror. You took out life insurance on me and Emma? It's normal financial planning, Amanda said weakly, but the explanation sounded hollow even to her. For $2 million each? I asked. When you're drowning in gambling debt and planning to disappear to another country? Detective Martinez stepped forward. Amanda, we know about the offshore account. We know about the money you didn't actually lose gambling. We know this whole gambling addiction story was a cover for a much more elaborate plan. That's when Amanda finally broke. The mask of control she'd been wearing slipped completely, and what emerged was pure, desperate rage. You ruined everything! She screamed at me. I had it all planned out perfectly. Michael would have grieved for a few months, maybe a year, and then moved on. Emma would have been adopted by some nice family. I would have been living on a beach somewhere with enough money to last the rest of my life. You were planning to murder your own family, Michael said, his voice barely audible. I was planning to be free, Amanda shouted back. Free from this suffocating life. Free from pretending to be someone I'm not. Free from being trapped in this boring suburban hell. Emma was sobbing now, terrified by her mother's raised voice and the chaos around her. The sound of her crying seemed to penetrate even Amanda's rage. Look what you've done, Amanda said, suddenly focusing on Emma. Look how upset she is. This is all your fault, Diana. If you'd just minded your own business, none of this would have happened. If I'd minded my own business, you would have murdered my son and granddaughter, I replied. It would have been quick, Amanda said, as if that made it better. They wouldn't have suffered. It would have looked like an accident. The casual way she discussed murdering her own family finally pushed Michael over the edge. You're insane, he said, moving toward Emma. You're completely insane. Don't come any closer. Amanda swung the gun toward Michael away from Emma for the first time since this standoff began. That's when I made my move. Years of watching crime shows had taught me that when a gunman is distracted, when their attention is focused elsewhere, that's your moment. Amanda was looking at Michael, arguing with him, her grip on the gun slightly relaxed. I lunged forward, not toward Amanda, but toward Emma. I grabbed my granddaughter and rolled with her behind the heavy oak coffee table that Henry had built with his own hands 40 years ago. The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the small living room. I heard glass shatter, heard someone scream, heard the sound of a struggle. I wrapped my arms around Emma and held her close, shielding her from whatever was happening. It's okay, baby, I whispered in her ear. Grandma's here. Everything's going to be okay. When the noise stopped, when Detective Martinez called out, all clear, I carefully raised my head. Amanda was on the floor, her hands cuffed behind her back, the gun lying several feet away. She wasn't hurt, but she looked defeated, broken, like someone who had finally run out of lies and schemes. Michael was standing against the wall, his face pale but uninjured. The bullet had gone wild, shattering a window instead of hitting anyone. Is everyone okay? Detective Martinez asked, helping me and Emma to our feet. We're fine, I said, though I was shaking so badly I could barely stand. Emma clung to me, her small body trembling. Grandma, why was Mommy being mean? Why did she have a gun? I looked down at this innocent child, this beautiful little girl who had just witnessed her mother threaten to kill her, and I realized that the hardest part wasn't over. Now we had to figure out how to help Emma understand that the mother she loved had never really existed. Sometimes people get very sick in their minds, I said gently. And when that happens, they do things that don't make sense. But it's not your fault, and it's going to be okay. As the officers led Amanda away, she looked back at us one last time. For just a moment, I thought I saw something that might have been regret in her eyes, but then she was gone, and we were left to pick up the pieces of the life she had shattered. Michael came over and wrapped his arms around both Emma and me. Mom, I'm so sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry I didn't see what she was doing. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. You couldn't have known, I said, holding both of them close. She was very good at lying. But as we stood there in that destroyed living room, surrounded by the debris of our family's trust, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Relief. The truth was out. The lies were over. Amanda could never hurt any of us again. And for the first time in 2 years, since Henry's death, I felt like I had my family back. 6 months later, I sat in my new kitchen, watching Emma carefully arrange chocolate chips on sugar cookies we were making together. The kitchen was smaller than the one in Michael and Emma's old house, but it was warm and filled with the kind of laughter that had been missing from our family for far too long. "Grandma, do you think Daddy will like the cookies?" Emma asked, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration as she placed each chip with mathematical precision. "I think Daddy will love them," I said, smoothing a strand of her dark hair behind her ear. "But I think he'll love spending time with us even more." After Amanda's arrest, Michael had sold their house. Too many memories, he'd said. Too many lies embedded in every room. He and Emma had moved into a cozy 2-bedroom apartment just 3 blocks from my place, close enough that Emma could walk to my house after school on the days when Michael worked late. The transition hadn't been easy for any of us, but especially not for Emma. Child psychologists had warned us that she would need time to process what had happened, to understand why her mother had done the terrible things she'd done. There had been nightmares, episodes of anger, and heartbreaking questions that we'd tried our best to answer honestly but gently. "Why did Mommy want to hurt us?" she'd asked one day about a month after Amanda's arrest. Michael and I had looked at each other, still struggling ourselves to understand how someone could live such an elaborate lie for so long. "Sometimes people get very sick in their hearts and minds," I'd told her. "And when that happens, they stop being able to love other people the way they should. It doesn't mean there was anything wrong with you, sweetheart. It means there was something wrong with her." The legal proceedings had moved swiftly once all of Amanda's crimes came to light. Detective Martinez had been thorough in his investigation, uncovering not just the gambling and theft, but the full scope of her identity fraud. Amanda Wilson, it turned out, wasn't even her real name. She was actually Sarah Beth Connors, and she had a criminal history stretching back over a decade, spanning multiple states and identities. "She's what we call a long-term grifter," Detective Martinez had explained to us during one of many meetings. "Someone who creates false identities and elaborate backstories to infiltrate families or communities, usually for financial gain. Your family wasn't her first target, and if we hadn't caught her, you wouldn't have been her last." The offshore account had indeed contained nearly $400,000, money that would be returned to us as part of the restitution. It wouldn't replace everything Henry had saved over his lifetime, but it was enough to secure Emma's future and ensure that Michael could rebuild his financial stability. Amanda herself had been sentenced to 15 years in prison for identity fraud, theft, forgery, and attempted murder. She would be eligible for parole in 10 years. But Detective Martinez assured us that her pattern of behavior made it unlikely she would ever be released early. "People like Amanda don't typically reform," he'd said. "They just get better at hiding who they really are." The most surprising discovery had come when investigators searched Amanda's belongings more thoroughly. Hidden in a safety deposit box under one of her false names, they'd found detailed files on at least 6 other families she'd been monitoring, complete with financial records, family photos, and what appeared to be preliminary plans for infiltrating their lives. "You saved more than just your own family," Detective Martinez had told me. "By uncovering her scheme, you prevented her from destroying other families the way she tried to destroy yours." The sound of Michael's key in the front door brought me back to the present. Emma squealed with delight and ran to greet her father, nearly knocking him over with the force of her hug. "Daddy!" Grandma and I made cookies and I finished my homework, and Mrs. Chen next door gave me a book about butterflies. Michael laughed, the sound rich and genuine in a way it hadn't been during those final months with Amanda. "Slow down, sweetheart. One thing at a time." He looked better than he had in years. The constant tension that had marked his features during his marriage to Amanda was gone, replaced by something that looked like peace. It had taken months of therapy for him to work through the guilt and self-recrimination he felt over not seeing through Amanda's deception, but he was finally beginning to forgive himself. "How was your day?" I asked, hugging him as Emma dragged him toward the kitchen to see the cookies. "Good," he said. Really good, actually. I got confirmation that the insurance company is going to pay out the full amount for the house, and my lawyer says the divorce will be final next month. The insurance payout would give Michael a fresh start. He'd already put a deposit down on a small house in a good school district, with a yard where Emma could play and a bedroom that would be designated as mine for the nights when I stayed over to babysit. That's wonderful news, I said, meaning it. Are you nervous about the house? A little, he admitted, but excited too. It'll be the first place that's really ours, you know? No history, no lies, just Emma and me starting fresh. As we sat around my small dining table eating dinner, I marveled at how different our family dynamic had become. Before Amanda's arrest, family dinners had been tense affairs, filled with undercurrents of manipulation and control that I hadn't fully understood at the time. Now, our conversations flowed naturally. Emma chattered about school and friends. Michael shared stories from his work, and I felt like I had my place in their lives again. "Grandma," Emma said suddenly, looking up from her spaghetti, "are you going to live with us in the new house?" Michael and I exchanged glances. We'd been discussing this very question for weeks, trying to figure out what arrangement would work best for everyone. "Well," I said carefully, "Daddy and I have been talking about that. How would you feel if Grandma had her own little apartment attached to your new house? That way I could be close by when you need me, but you and Daddy could still have your own space too." Emma's face lit up. "Like a grandmother suite. My friend Madison has one for her grandma." "Exactly like that," Michael said, smiling. "Would you like that?" "Yes." Emma bounced in her chair. "Then Grandma could read me stories every night and help me with my homework and teach me how to make more cookies." The in-law suite had been Michael's idea, and I'd been touched by the gesture. After everything that had happened, after the way Amanda had tried to drive a wedge between us, he wanted to make sure I was an integral part of their daily lives again. Later that evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Michael and I sat on my small porch, drinking tea and watching the neighborhood settle into quiet. "Mom," he said suddenly, "I need to tell you something." I turned to look at him, noting the serious tone in his voice. "I've been thinking a lot about Dad lately," he continued. "About the inheritance money, about everything Amanda stole from us. And I realized something." "What's that?" "Dad worked his whole life to provide for this family. He saved every penny so that we would be secure, so that Emma would have opportunities he never had. And Amanda almost destroyed all of that." I nodded, still feeling the ache of loss when I thought about Henry's life savings being fed into slot machines and lost at card tables. "But you know what I realized?" Michael went on. "The money wasn't really the important thing. The important thing was the love behind it, the intention, the sacrifice Dad made for all of us. And Amanda couldn't steal that. She couldn't steal the love, or the values he taught us, or the family he built." Tears pricked at my eyes. "Your father would be so proud of the man you've become, Michael. Especially of how you've handled all of this." "I almost lost sight of what really mattered," he said quietly. "I almost let Amanda convince me that success meant having the biggest house, the most expensive things, the perfect life that looked good from the outside. But Dad knew better. He knew that real wealth is having people who love you, people you can trust, people who will stand by you when everything falls apart. Like you stood by me," I said. Michael shook his head. "Like you stood by us. Mom, you saved our lives. If you hadn't started asking questions, if you hadn't been brave enough to investigate and confront Amanda, she would have killed me and Emma and collected the insurance money. You literally saved our lives." The weight of that truth still amazed me sometimes. 6 months ago, I'd been a grieving widow who felt invisible in her own family's life. Now I was the person who had exposed a killer and saved the people I loved most. "I just did what any mother would do," I said. "No," Michael said firmly. "You did what a brave, strong, intelligent woman would do. You didn't let Amanda intimidate you or manipulate you or make you doubt yourself. You trusted your instincts and you fought for what was right." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the evening. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear children playing, the sound of laughter carrying on the warm spring air. "There's something else I want to talk to you about," Michael said eventually. "What's that?" "I've been thinking about starting a foundation, using some of the insurance money to help other families who've been victims of financial fraud or identity theft, maybe working with Detective Martinez and other law enforcement agencies to educate people about the warning signs. The idea took my breath away. "Michael, that's wonderful. I want to call it the Henry Patterson Foundation," he said, "in honor of Dad and in honor of the values he taught us about protecting family and doing what's right." I felt tears rolling down my cheeks, but they were happy tears. The idea that Henry's legacy could live on by helping other families, that something positive could come from the terrible thing Amanda had done to us, felt like a kind of redemption. "Your father would love that," I said. "He would absolutely love that." 3 weeks later, I stood in the backyard of Michael and Emma's new house, watching my granddaughter chase butterflies through the garden we'd planted together. The house was modest, but perfect, with big windows that let in lots of light, and a kitchen where Emma and I could bake cookies to our heart's content. My apartment was small but cozy, with its own entrance and a perfect view of the garden. Best of all, it was connected to the main house by a covered walkway, so I could be as involved or as independent as the situation called for. Detective Martinez stopped by that afternoon to give us an update on Amanda's case. The appeals process had been unsuccessful, and she would serve her full sentence. More importantly, the investigation had led to the arrest of 2 other individuals who had been working with her to target vulnerable families. "You really did save a lot of people," he told me as we sat on the back porch watching Emma play. "The network she was part of was much larger than we initially realized." "I'm just glad it's over," I said. "It is over," he confirmed. "Amanda will never be able to hurt your family again." As Detective Martinez left, Emma came running over with a butterfly perched on her finger. "Look, Grandma, it landed on me." I marveled at her resilience, at the way she'd bounced back from the trauma of what her mother had done. "Children are stronger than we think," the therapist had told us, especially when they're surrounded by love and stability. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I said. "Just like you." That evening, as we all sat around the dinner table in their new house, I looked at the faces of the 2 people I loved most in the world and felt a deep sense of contentment. We had survived Amanda's deception and manipulation. We had survived her attempts to destroy our family, and now we were stronger than ever. Michael raised his glass of water in a toast. "To new beginnings," he said. "To family," I added. "To butterflies," Emma chimed in, making us all laugh. As we clinked our glasses together, I thought about Henry and how proud he would be of the family we'd become. Not perfect, not without scars, but real and honest, and full of the kind of love that can't be stolen or destroyed. Amanda had tried to erase me from my family's life, had called me an old hag and treated me like I was worthless. But in the end, she had been the one who was erased. And I was still here, still loving, still fighting for the people who mattered most. The inheritance money was gone, but Henry's real legacy lived on in all of us, and that was worth more than any amount of money in the world.